Hello, and welcome to Right Here, Right Queer. I'm your host, R.K. Ashwick, here today with Tess Carletta.
Hiya.
And Luna Day.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about planning versus pantsing. So, planning, also called plotting, is pretty straightforward. It's where you're planning your novel before you write it. But for those who haven't heard the other term before, what is pantsing?
So, to me, pantsing is when you don't really have much of an outline or anything planned. You just open up your document, start writing, and then wherever the story takes you is where it ends up going. And none of it is preordained by your planning process.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just that real creative energy of just like letting something organically just flow out onto the page without much prior thought, just vibes and just see what happens.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. To throw you a curveball, what is plantsing? Am I the only one who knows this term?
Is it like a combination thereof, like having a little bit of a plan, but then kind of going off on your own and letting the process guide you the rest of the way there?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, basically, for people who, if they do a detailed outline, they feel stuck or they lose interest. It's like they might plan out the basic scenes or like the beginning and the end, but then they'll pants their way through the rest.
Yeah, that's how I understand it. It gives room for that sort of, it's a different type of creativity, isn't it? To sort of just let the chips fall where they may, but actually sometimes you do need to have some sort of structure in place before you get started.
Yeah, exactly. So now that we've established planning, pantsing, and plantsing, what are you? Are you a planner, a pantser, or something in between? And has your process or toolset changed as you've grown in your writing journey and as you've discovered how you like to write?
I'm going to say a little bit of all of the above. So I'm a pantser when it comes to usually a idea that just hits me out of the blue. So if I get struck by the muses and I just have to get that idea out, I'll just write whatever the heck comes to mind and then I'll tidy it up and think about like plot and structure later. If it's something where I think there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of things that I need to remember when I write the Freya saga, there's a lot of plot in there. So I have to plot that out to fine detail what's going to be in each scene. And then with something more like the Fated Fae series, where there's not as much plot, it's quite light in terms of plot, I can give myself the sort of freedom of going, okay, well, this is where we start. This is kind of what needs to happen in the middle, and this is where we need to end. But the rest can be pantsed, and it's just kind of like, let the story tell itself, basically.
That all makes sense. Yeah.
I would say for me, I am a big planner. My outline for Goldheart was over 30 pages long. But like I was sitting here trying to remember what my outline looked like for Kit Basie. And I think I genuinely, like, my first book was like a fluke because I don't think it had an outline. I think it might have had bullet points on a separate document, but I don't even remember what those bullet points said, if they were plot related. Because once again, dear listener, I wrote this in a feverish state the first time I had COVID. So I'm like sitting here and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, did the fever strip me of my outlining memories? Or was there truly no outline? But for the most part, especially with a project that has the breadth of Goldheart, I had a very, very, very detailed outline. I remember so succinctly that, like, if you were like, what page of your outline was this event on? I'd be like, page 14. Duh.
Love that for you.
Okay, I am also very much an over planner. I use a chart to outline where I'm trying to keep track of like changes in POVs and like, okay, this happens in this chapter and I'm covering like this part of this character's arc, and that's all to ideally give me a visual into if I'm properly tracking all the things that I need to track. Like if I got multiple subplots, like I don't want to go, like if I'm looking at the chart, I can very clearly see if there are like 6 empty boxes in a row, I'm like, oh wow, I have definitely completely forgotten about that subplot for the last 6 chapters. Maybe I should do something about that. And I wish that it meant that, you know, my first draft turned out like great and perfect and smooth, and it absolutely doesn't. So I'm constantly trying to like adjust my process, and that could include not planning as much. But the one exception is that when I wrote the one secret project number 1, which is a project that you both know about, but the general populace doesn't yet know about.
secret.
I also wrote it in a feverish haze, but it was during the election last year. And I had like a very basic, like, it's only this number of chapters. This is what I want to have happen in each chapter. But I didn't chart it out. I just kind of like went for it. So even though it was planned, that's less planning than what I am used to.
I feel like you're often using writing vocabulary that I've never heard before, which makes me curious if your outlines and your planning documents, like what they look like. I'm not going to say I would like pay $100 to see them, because I don't think you would ask $100 of me, but I would definitely like be super interested to see like how your outlines look.
Yeah, I mean they're not super high tech. They're just like Google Sheets because I don't have Excel on my computer. But yeah, it's literally like chapter number, POV, particularly for like, Rival, we're going back and forth between like Ambrose and Eli, and then we're adding Ambrose, Eli, Dawn. And I color code it to be like, oh crap, I have forgotten to be in Eli's POV for 5 chapters now. Readers might think that's a little weird. And then I've got like summary, and then all of the other columns are basically like anything else that needs to grow or change or like be dropped throughout the book. So like an Ambrose Eli arc, and then Dawn Rory, for example, for book 2, and then, which Rosamund Street characters are in this, so I'm not like forgetting about Sherry. In my next outline, I'm gonna need to put, is Tom in this chapter? Because I realized after finishing draft 1 of Draft for a Dragon, I completely forgot about Tom. She's in like chapter 1 and chapter 32 and nowhere in between.
Oh my god.
It's embarrassing for me. I have let everyone down. So it's stuff like that where I'm like, I know that if I just try to hit it in the document, I'm going to have absolutely no sense on like if I'm pacing things right, if I'm remembering things. I need to have that visual.
That sounds way more intense than, like, I literally just use Post-its on this really big piece of cardboard I have from when I ordered my bed from online. So
that is so fun and whimsical and cute. And also, I think a lot of people, they go towards either pantsing or plantsing because they find the chart outline overwhelming, which is completely fair.
I feel inspired by you because that is quite a chaotic approach, my approach with like the Post-it notes, because they don't retain their stickiness. Like, I'm losing Post-it notes all over the show. And also, depending on the size you get, obviously, it does limit how much you can put on there. And there's extra things that need to be tracked, like you said, like subplots and things like that. So I've got more into spreadsheets and things recently with my ADHD because I do find it helps my brain kind of remember key information. So I'm definitely looking to upgrade my plotting skills. So I'm going to have to come back to you on that.
Yeah. Well, and there's also like, you could think of a chart as like digital sticky notes, because it's still easy to drag and drop and color code and like erase and rewrite stuff. Or there's even, I think it's like Miro, where like you can literally simulate digital sticky notes and just like move stuff around, and it's like nice and visual without having to actually like physically erase and rewrite and, oh no, I lost the sticky note and I don't remember where it's supposed to go. Is this supposed to be in Act 2 or Act 3? Like stuff like that. There's so many different ways to organize in the modern day, which is great.
That sounds like a good plan.
So what are the upsides and downsides to the different strategies? I think we've covered it like a little bit, but I feel like there's more that can trip people up.
I have a hot take. My hot take is that if you're going to be a pantser, you need to be very good at internally keeping track of tension and structure. I have encountered a lot of people who are pantsers, and the pacing of their book makes no sense at all. And someone I knew from college wrote this ginormous, like, fantasy epic story. And in that story, he spent a lot of time on the world building and the exploration of the world. And then we would get to a little action scene, and it would just putter out. The action would start, and the character would be like, I don't recall what happened once the battle came because I blacked out and became like a warrior that blah, 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 blah. And I was like, my friend, we have had all of this world building for like 20,000 words, and then we finally get to an action sequence, and then it's 500 words where nothing happens.
Oh, no.
Oh, dear.
I was like, do you outline? And he said, no, I have it all in my head. And I was like, okay, but if you had an outline, you could see on paper the parts of your story that are world building, the parts of your story that are action based, and you could see, like, if you created an outline based off of what you've already done, you could see it's world building, exposition, a little tiny bullet point for action, and then back to world building. I was like, there's just a lot of weird stuff going on with the pacing. So I think, and I'm biased because I really do love a good outline, but having an outline makes you able to see everything big picture. So you can kind of pick out the lags in the story. You can kind of plan the pacing ahead of time without wasting your time writing it and then being like, oh my gosh, I've just spent 20,000 words on world building and no words on action sequence, and it's gonna take the reader out of the story and make them struggle.
Yeah. I also, I mean, maybe this is just me, but like, I got nothing in my head. All of it's in the chart.
Yeah.
How does anybody keep anything in their head? I don't get it.
I don't know. I have no idea. At all.
Mystery magic.
And I know people can do it. I know people do it all the time. And I more often than, like, I encounter pantsers more often than plotters. And every time I'm like, what sorcery are you performing on your mind to keep a whole novel's worth of information locked inside your head?
Well, I think particularly for people who are starting out, pantsing makes sense because you're going off of what is inspiring you. So if you're like continually inspired and like you know what you want to put on the page, then yeah, like why not keep going? And then as you discover like, oh no, I did put in only 6 chapters of world building, then maybe you start looking into like how to structure novels and how to plan them, and then you navigate naturally more into plotting. Or I feel like some people could even do the opposite if they're like, you know, a dozen years into their career and they're like, I, you know, write in the same subgenre, like I really know what I'm doing. Maybe they need less of the planning because it's so internalized. But that's like, you know, beginner all the way to expert level, in my opinion.
And I think, like, the moral is you can find something that works for you. But if your beta readers or your editors all come together and say that there are the same kind of structural issues in the story, an outline might be a helpful tool, or outlining in a new way, or planning in a new way, or even ditching your outline altogether. That might be a good place to start experimenting with different options.
There are also a bunch of different like brainstorming tools that kind of expand into plotting. I think I use this for the secret project number, is it 1 or 2? I've got 3. This is embarrassing. Secret project is the snowflake method, where like you start with like a one-liner on like this is what the story is, and then you kind of split that into, or like you branch it out into like, okay, what happens at the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then you branch it a little bit farther, so you're sort of organically exploring like what are the building blocks of the story, and you can go, you know, as detailed or as basic as you want to, depending on like how much you want to plant, I guess. But that's what I ended up using for that story. And I found that to be helpful and pretty intuitive and not super overwhelming.
So I'm going to step in and be the absolute chaos goblin here.
Do it!
Right, so Chaos Goblin Luna. I absolutely love using a combination of the two. So I don't know if anybody knows this, but I wrote Faye's Mate, the first book in the Fated Faye series, in about a week.
Oh, wow.
And it was completely pantsed. Like, I had no prior concept to what I was doing, and it just exploded onto the page. And yeah, okay, I had to go back and I had to do quite a bit of editing and sort of like restructuring it to make sure, you know, it had flow and, you know, make sure any of the things that would be brought up later on in other books existed. But for the most part, it was just pure adrenaline, pure excitement for this new shiny idea. And I just ran with it, like pure creation. And do you know what? I have been chasing that high ever since. Like, I have not recaptured that momentum since. It's been years. But I also completely agree that having some sort of plot and structure is super, super helpful. Like, again, with the Threa saga, it's 6 POVs. There's more POVs joining in the later books.
Oh my gosh.
And if I don't have that on a spreadsheet, or like at least plotted out in some way, shape or form, it is going to be a hot mess. There's so much going on. Like, it's epic high fantasy, so there's so many subplots and little threads to weave together that it would just be pure chaos if it wasn't pre-plotted. But I find I get very stuck with that because I have this very detailed idea of what needs to be in each chapter, and then I come to write it, I'm like, but I already know what happens in this chapter, and I now find that really boring to write because there's no new creativity for me. There's no excitement for it because in my head it's already happened. Like, I'm done. Like, I've read that bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've already experienced that. So for me, I prefer pantsing because that to me is pure creation, but it's just chaos creation because there's no like structure to it. But if I try and add structure, my brain goes, oh, but this is boring because we already know what we're doing and there's no like creative like energy to it. So that's why I try and do a little bit of both to give myself the room to have that sort of organic creation, but with a little bit of structure.
Out of curiosity, how long did it take you to learn that about yourself and like get to a process that works for you?
I mean, I think I'm still learning. I don't think you ever stop learning when you're an author, but I mean, I started my author career with the Freya Saga. And I had notebooks upon notebooks. I had so many Word documents. I knew at least the first sort of 2.5 books, almost chapter by chapter, what was going to happen with them. And I'm still writing book 3, like, as we speak. And that's something that I very much realise now, like, when I go back to the Freya Saga and try and write, I very quickly become stuck with it. And I really struggle to keep my momentum with it and keep it exciting for me because the story's been in my head for so long, it doesn't excite me as much as the new shiny idea does. And that's probably ADHD brain as well. But then when I'm writing something new, like, each book in the Fated Fae series is a different couple, so it's new characters, it's, you know, sometimes it's a different part of, you know, the world that it's set in, and, you know, that always feels new and interesting and exciting for me. And then obviously, you know, secret projects and things, I just let my brain run rampant with it, and that gives me that sort of dopamine rush. And, you know, I think that's something I've noticed a lot more in the last year, I would say, as I've developed as an author, that I do need that sort of creative freedom, so to speak, in order to stay consistent with my writing. Otherwise, I lose interest with it, and I get a bit sort of bored of my own writing because I already know the story in my head.
See, I'm the exact opposite, where if I'm struggling with writer's block, my outline is the only thing that can, like, pull me out. Because when I'm like, I have no idea where to go, I open up my outline and I'm like, and I'll just stare at it until the scene like unfolds in my head, because like I'll have the general vibes in my head already, but the exact specifics are really hard to cling at sometimes if your writing is not coming super easily to you. So having like a really detailed outline for me is kind of like my little fail-safe thing.
See, I find that like pulling teeth. Like, if I just sit there and stare at my outline, I'm like, I already know all of this. I actually got a trick from like a writing course I took recently, and it was to write something that's not going to be in your book, maybe something that's like off page or behind the scenes, and just do something really random with your characters, like a complete like plot twist that doesn't end up in the book, but it gets you to kind of reunite with your character and kind of get into the flow of writing from their perspective, and then you kind of ease yourself back into the bit you're supposed to be, like what's that I'm looking for? Redirect yourself into the actual plot that you're supposed to be writing.
That makes sense to me.
I never thought of that. I like that.
Yeah, it's like a very specific warm-up exercise.
Yeah, it's quite helpful.
I was just having this conversation with another author friend because we have a secret project going on, and we were talking about how we work individually. Like, it would be hard if she was a pantser and I was a planner. But we both like outlines, but she had been saying to me, like, we need to make sure that there's some level of flexibility. And I think I forgot this myself when I was writing Goldheart, and I think I encounter writers who forget it too, but like, if you outline, you are not married to that outline. You have not entered a biblical covenant with that outline. The outline can change at any time for any reason at all. And so like halfway through Goldheart, I had a epiphany of sorts of like how I should better utilize the ending. So I had to rewrite half of my outline. And I still had the outline when I needed it, but like it could change. So I think that, you know, if you're thinking that an outline might benefit you, but you're worried about it constraining you and having to stick to it, darling, there is a backspace on your keyboard for just that reason. So
Preach. Yep. Absolutely.
If you write it on a notebook, you can cross that shit out, you can erase it, you can start over on a new page. There is no commitment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of tacking onto that advice about the backspace button, which is very real and very true, as Nina would say. What advice do you have for new authors trying to figure out how to tackle their books?
I'm going to say, and this might be controversial, I don't know if this is controversial, but I'm going to say just trial and error, because you can do all the courses, you can watch all the YouTube videos, you can, you know, look up to your favourite author and like your favourite author does it this way, so you're like, oh, well, that's how I have to do it. But until you actually start writing, you don't know what works well for you. But I would say pay attention. So if you do find yourself like getting really stuck, maybe just try more freedom in your writing. If you find that you're just a complete chaos goblin and you really need that structure, like add that structure in. And you can, you know, find people that will guide you through that, or courses or YouTube videos or whatever. And I just think trial and error to find what works for you. And then when you find what works, stick with that and build on it.
Similarly, my advice is a little bit different, but I would say to follow your intuition when you begin the process. It's kind of like anything else, your body will tell you what you need. And I don't know if that's like a hot take of like, listen to your body when you write. But I would say to start with an outline and to get as much planning as you can that seems natural. And then the second it starts to feel like you're pulling teeth, you're ready to get writing, you just want to start writing and you've got nothing else to add to the outline, even if it's incomplete, just start writing then. And then even if your outline is a little bit sparse or whatever, kind of go from there, and then you'll be able to tell if you need more outline, if you need to spend more time on it, or if you should be like Chaos Luna and just get going with it.
But I think you know that based on your personality as well, like very similar to your intuition. If you know that you're a very organised, meticulous person that plans everything, you know, in fine detail in general, chances are you're going to be that sort of writer. But if you're quite a sort of wing it, just kind of go with the flow, spontaneous type person, then you might be more inclined to pantsing, or you might just need to find a bit of a balance. So I do think, as well as intuition, it is kind of like your natural sort of go-to in general plays a big part in it.
I also think it's important to give yourself room to try new things with new books.
Yeah.
Because, like, I think with both of us, our strategies for planning and outlining were different depending on what project we were working on. So when you start something new, don't be like, well, I have to do it this way because this is what's worked for me in the past. That might not be necessarily helpful this time, but it's worth a shot. You know, like, give it a try. If it doesn't work, try something new. Trial and error.
Tacking onto that, something I was going to mention earlier was I also think it depends on the type of book that you're writing. So I think if you're planning a really long series with perhaps lots of moving parts, perhaps lots of characters and lots of plot and things like that, then planning would almost be essential, because in order to keep that going. Whereas if you're planning a light-hearted, low plot standalone or a series of standalones, then perhaps planning isn't quite as crucial because it's a very sort of vibes-based story. So I think it also depends on what sort of book you're writing as well, as to whether or not you can give yourself that sort of extra creative freedom, or whether or not you really need to sort of knuckle down the structure.
I agree with all of that. My one part of advice is going to be, different books might need different strategies, so don't be afraid to like change it up if something isn't working. And then my other bit of advice is stolen straight from Alexandra Rowland from Tumblr, where they were talking about like, if you get to a part of your writing where you feel really frustrated by it or really like afraid to keep going, lean into that fear. Figure out like what part of it is making you afraid or frustrated, and like how you can fix it rather than running away from it, because it's not going to just resolve itself if you run away from it. And I feel like that can be applied to like if you're trying a plotting or pantsing strategy that is really frustrating you, don't be afraid to lean into that and analyze and be like, okay, what is not working for me? I think that's just part of the trial and error that you mentioned on figuring out what works best for you. Even if you're like, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, there really is no like supposed to be. You know, it's however you want to handle your writing process.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think the last piece of advice, which is not advice, it is a law. Do not break this law.
Uh-oh.
When you are planning your book, you will get stuck, you will get frustrated, you will become confused and need to get back on your path. To get back on your path, do not look the AI beast in its eyes.
Oh, truth.
Oh my gosh, yes.
There are so many local authors that I talk to, and they're like, oh, I just used the generative AI. I just used ChatGPT to plan out my little story. And I'm like, if you start your sentence with, I just used ChatGPT 4, I'm done listening. I'm already halfway out the door. Forget not the lack of ethical foundation in AI. Forget not the ecological toll it takes on the environment. Be true, be a real human artist, be proud of your craft. And if I hear you've used generative AI, I will be throwing rocks at you in my head. I will be throwing eggs at you in my head.
We all will be.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. There's a very real psychological impact to using ChatGPT now that it's been around long enough for people to do studies on it. Whenever people do use it, like, obviously the studies put it in much more nuanced terms, but like, you're literally getting dumber.
Yeah.
Because you're not using your own critical thinking anymore. And
Yep.
if you say like, oh, I'll use it just this once,
No.
you're no longer building up the creativity skill that you need to solve problems when you're not using chat. You're not helping yourself in the long run. You're not helping anybody else. Like, it's just not a good idea.
100%.
And finally, if readers want to read the results of all of your planning and pantsing, where can they find you and your work?
You can find me on Instagram at tess.carletta, or you can find me at tesscarletta.com.
And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok under Luna Day Writer. And you can find my works on my website, which is lunaday.com.
And you can find me standing on my yard shaking my fist at the sky yelling about AI. Or alternatively, you can find me at rkashwick.com or rkashwick books on Instagram and I guess TikTok. And for this podcast, you can find us at Right Here, Right Queer podcast on Instagram. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you at the next roundtable.
Bye!